Hello and welcome back to another episode of Becoming Relentless. I'm your host, elenoa.mccabe. I'm an IFBB Bikini Pro and an online health and fitness coach. And today we are going to have a very special episode. Again, I'm going to talk about some more personal things. We're going to do 5 quotes and 5 books that have changed my life. They have impacted me in some way. They have really stuck out to me, and they have been things that I think about often. So to dive right in, number 1, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. And that quote is from Henry Ford, and it is definitely more of like a cliche. I've definitely seen billboards with it, but I think that it is such a powerful reminder of self-belief, and it just reminds you that your mindset dictates your outcomes. So in terms of fitness, if we want to frame it in like a prep perspective, if you go into a contest prep doubting your ability to stay consistent, then more than likely the results are going to reflect that. But conversely, if you go into a prep and you believe that you have the ability to adhere 100%, to bring a competitive package, then more than likely that's what the result is going to be. So whenever you are starting something new, trying something different, whether you think that you can or you think that you can't, you're probably right. And it could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So to me, this is one of the quotes that I always think about, especially in terms of like self-belief. And whenever I have like self-doubt, I have to remind myself like my mind is so powerful and what I think could come true. So for the second quote, your body can stand almost anything. It is your mind that you have to convince. And this quote speaks more to like mental toughness. And I think that when it comes to doing something hard, more often than not, your mind is what tells you to give up first. So if we want to frame it again in fitness, like when you go into a top set and you're pressing really heavy weight overhead, or maybe you're trying to hit a squat PR or whatever it is, that heavy weight can be so like scary. But as long as you approach the weight knowing that you have to beat your mind and not necessarily your body, you're going to be able to pull through. And like what I mean by that too is if you're newer into fitness or if you have been competing for a while, like, you know, going into these top sets or even like working sets in the gym, you can convince yourself before you even start the set that like it's not going to go well. So again, like the mental component of bodybuilding and also the mental component of this specific quote, I think is so important because your body follows your mind. So if you go into the set and you tell yourself, I'm going to get 8 reps, like no matter what, then you are going to do it. And so this quote is something I think about a lot in the gym. Obviously, like I know how strong I am and I know that I can lift weights, but sometimes you have those days where in your mind you're like, can I do this? And that can also apply to a lot of different things, like just having that mental toughness on whether you stick it out or you continue like pushing through. All right, the third quote. So strength doesn't come from what you can do. It comes from overcoming the things that you once thought you couldn't. And if you haven't already sensed like the common thread or theme of all of these quotes, like it speaks a lot to the way that you think about challenges and the way that you approach them. So when you have like mental resilience, mental toughness, when you're not focused solely on like what your mind is telling you that you can and can't do, you're able to push through barriers that you probably thought were impossible. So strength isn't like what you can do. True strength isn't all the weight that you can lift or all the challenges that you face. It's from overcoming things that you actually thought that you couldn't do. So for example, like if you were trying to attempt like a 300-pound hip thrust or something, you can see other people do it. You can see other athletes do that. And you might convince yourself that like, oh, I'll never get there. I'll never be strong enough. But you'll never know until you actually try. And sometimes, like as long as you go into it thinking like, I just want to try, I just want to see if I can do it, that strength of overcoming that thing that you thought you couldn't, it'll come to you. So I think if you have like a goal or a task that you've been avoiding because it feels too hard, take a step this week towards proving it to yourself that you're actually stronger than you think. And you can apply this like outside of fitness as well, but obviously like the easiest thing to apply it to is like within the gym. If there's a lift that you've been attempting or thinking about attempting, take a step towards doing that this week. And remember that the strength doesn't come from what you can already do. You have to overcome new things to build strength. Quote number 4 is, take care of your body. It is the only place that you have to live. And this means a lot to me personally because I think especially within the fitness and bodybuilding industry, we tend to prioritize aesthetics over health. But you have to remember, like, your body is the only body that you get in this lifetime. And so we have to make sure that your mental health, your physical health, like the health and longevity piece is present if you are bodybuilding or if you are pursuing some of these more extreme sports or extreme goals, because at a certain point, aesthetics are going to fade. Like, we're all going to age, we're all going to get old. But as long as you're prioritizing your health and taking care of your body in a way that takes care of it and isn't detrimental, health is a long game. Like, you have to remember that. So I think it's really easy, especially in bodybuilding and contest prep, to get sucked into like wanting to do more, chasing that pro card, chasing the Olympia qualification, chasing wins, putting a lot of stock and self-worth into what you look like. But you have to remember, like, taking care of your body is number one, not for the aesthetic reasons, for the health and longevity reasons. And then the last quote that I think about a lot, quote number 5, is, fear is temporary, but regret is forever. And I think about this one a lot because I once had like a mentor that I looked up to. He told me that I let fear get in my way. He was like, you have so much potential, but you're often like scared to take action, or you have this like fear of failure, and I can see it hold you back. And that just, honestly, it really hurt to hear that, but it also made me realize that I did feel a lot of fear. Like, I used to get scared and like not want to take action, or just back away and go back to what was familiar. And I do think that like fear of failure keeps a lot of people stuck, and it keeps them from pursuing their dreams, whether that is like competing, whether that is going for a new job, whether that is like moving states, cities, leaving relationships, starting relationships. Like, there's so much fear of failure or fear of making the quote unquote wrong decision and failing in the eyes of other people, and it ends up holding you back. So my one challenge for you this week is, what is that one thing that you're holding back on because of fear? And I think that you should take a small step forward towards that this week. Something that I listened to on actually also that like brought this quote up recently was, I think it was on TikTok, but this guy had been visiting his uncle in the hospital, and his uncle kept like a stack of journals, and then his uncle passed away, and this guy was like reading through the journals, and he said that the number one theme that he read, especially in the last like few years of his uncle's life, like, and his uncle had spent a lot of time in the hospital, was that there were major regrets of not taking action. Like, that was like the number one thing that he saw his uncle regretted, was not doing things that he had felt pulled to do or felt called to do because of some sort of fear. And I think that a lot of us can relate to that. And we have this inner compass that we don't always listen to because of that fear. So I think it's really important to ground yourself, find the root cause of what that fear is that's holding you back, and then take action, because otherwise you don't want to get to the end of your life and experience that feeling of, I wish I would have done more, or I wish I would have done that thing, and have these regrets. Okay. So we're now going to talk about 5 books that have changed my life. And you guys know I'm a big reader. I love like all sorts of books, but these ones, they stand out to me for a lot of different reasons. And again, you'll probably see a theme with them. But the first book that I think about and I read at least like once a year is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And it talks a lot about mental toughness. So again, that mental resilience component. If you haven't read this book already, I highly recommend it. If you're familiar with David Goggins, which you probably are, it's like his life story. And it's very much written in his tone of voice. So if you're not like a big fan of cursing, then probably don't get the audiobook, maybe get like the physical copy. But this book taught me that most of our limits are entirely self-imposed. And that's a lot of it is mental again. So whether you're pursuing like a new goal, whether you're trying to get into fitness or you're trying to do something that requires a lot of inner strength or even physical strength, just remembering that a lot of the things you feel limited on are self-imposed. And if you haven't read the book, I definitely recommend it. It'd be great going into the new year because it's going to definitely light a fire within you. The second book is The Compound Effect, and that is by Darren Hardy. I think that we've all heard about like compound interest and like the effects of compounding things over time. There was something I listened to the other day actually that was like talking about compounding being like the eighth wonder of the world. Something like that, where it's basically just like every action that you take on a daily basis, like it does add up. And the small consistent wins over time, even though they might feel so small to you, that's what really matters. It adds up to like big changes and big effects over time. And so if we wanted to put that in like fitness terms, you could say like fitness isn't about quick fixes, right? You can do the yo-yo diet. Like you can do, I have a great example. So 75 hard, right? Everybody's like familiar with that. I've had athletes ask me like, I want to do 75 hard. I want to do that challenge. And I've always been resistant to that. And I'm not going to lie, like I've always talked shit about it. But I think the biggest thing that 75 hard teaches people can be consistency. Is it extreme? Yes. Is it sustainable for most people's lifestyles? No. But I do think that if you are able to stick to it, you can take away lessons. And the biggest lesson is going to be that consistency and how your daily efforts compound over time. So the book, The Compound Effect, just talks about how those small actions create big changes and different results. The next one is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I talked a lot about that book in 2022 and 2023 because that's when I started reading it and really going through, annotating, taking out like the lessons and stuff that I loved. And The Power of Now talks about the importance of being present. Being present is what helps you fully engage in the journey that you're on. And I think that we can get so caught up in like what's happened in the past or what we're thinking about in the future, but all we really truly have is the present moment. And it can be easy to forget that. So I really love The Power of Now. I read it almost every year just because it is such a good reminder and there's always something new that you can glean from it. But if you haven't already, I definitely recommend reading it at the start of this year and taking away ways that you can stay present, be where your feet are in the moment, and just stay very grounded within yourself. And then the next book, I'm sure everybody's pretty familiar with, but Relentless by Tim Grover. Whenever I'm in prep, I read Relentless and Winning. Both of them are by Tim Grover. Great books. But they talk about how success or achievement in a certain goal takes a certain mindset, a relentless mindset, like this podcast, obviously. And I think that in order to excel in anything like fitness or your career, your friendships, finances, whatever it is, you have to relentlessly pursue it. And we've talked about that on like previous podcasts, but I think Tim Grover puts things in a perspective that's really easy to understand. So if you're not really like a big reader, you're not into reading a lot of self-help books or even just like books in general, I think Relentless and Winning are easy to digest books because he talks about it in terms of like really famous athletes. So he talks about Michael Jordan, he talks about Kobe Bryant, and all of the athletes that he worked with and what he noticed that they did and the lessons that he learned from working with them. So if you're an athlete, if you are a bodybuilder, if you are in any sort of sport and you're looking to cultivate more of that resilient mindset, then I would definitely read any of Tim Grover's books. And then the very last book, so I read this last year with my book club. It's called The Mountain Is You by Brianna Wiest. And her book talks about how you are the mountain. So it details like self-sabotage and emotional intelligence, emotional awareness, and how if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling lost, if you're feeling held back in any way by your own thoughts or habits, you are essentially in your own way and how you can overcome that. She talks about how self-sabotage is a form of self-protection and that it usually stems from things like unprocessed emotions, limiting beliefs, fear of the unknown. And it's not necessarily that you're lazy or that you lack willpower. It's more so that your subconscious is trying to prevent you from perceiving failure. So again, full circle moment, like we're going back to that fear of failure theme. And I think that learning to identify your self-sabotaging behaviors and exploring the actual underlying reasons for them is really key to being able to get past any obstacle or challenge. Something else that I really loved about the book is how it emphasizes a lot of self-responsibility. So a lot of the time, the challenges that we face, they're not always external. They're often going to be reflections of your internal fears, your doubts, your unresolved traumas. And at the same time, like you're the only one that holds the power to overcome them. So a quote in there that I pulled out was, the mountain stands in front of you. The mountain that stands in front of you is the mountain that you were meant to climb. It was put in your path for a reason. So just embracing the idea that you have everything you need within you to solve your own problems and to achieve your own goals. So I think mostly what I wanted people to get out of this podcast was that the words that we read and what we listen to and hear shape how we show up in this world. And these quotes and these books have been such game changers in my own journey. So I hope that by sharing them, they can maybe inspire you. They can help you push through some obstacles and challenges, inspire you to dream bigger. And at the end of the day, you guys know this podcast always wants you guys to become relentless. So I hope that you all enjoyed this episode. If you want more like this, please let me know. But as always, please like, share, subscribe, send it to a friend. It really helps me out getting this podcast out to people who need to hear it, as well as this is like my own passion. So it's like sponsored by me. So if you have felt called to chat with me as like a coach, you need some advice, or you are thinking about hiring me, please use the booking link to schedule a free call in the show notes below. I would love to chat with you. But until the next episode, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for listening, and stay relentless.